At the dinner with investors, my daughter said in front of everyone, "You're being stupid. Be useful and go wash the dishes." She had no idea the main investor was an old flame of mine. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I spent 3 days preparing for that dinner. 3 days polishing the silverware my late husband Richard left me, pressing the good tablecloth, and perfecting every detail of the menu. At 68, I thought I'd learned to expect disappointment, but I still believed this night could save everything I'd built. My catering business wasn't just a company, it was my lifeline after Richard died 5 years ago. When the grief threatened to swallow me whole, I turned to the one thing that had always brought me peace: cooking. What started as making meals for neighbors became small events, then weddings, and finally a business that kept me afloat when his medical bills had drained our savings. The dining room looked perfect. Candles flickered on the mahogany table, casting warm shadows across the crystal glasses. The aroma of herb-crusted salmon and rosemary potatoes filled the air. I'd chosen my navy dress, the one that made me feel confident, and twisted my silver hair into the elegant chignon Richard always loved. 5 potential investors were coming tonight. 5 people who could either save my business or watch it crumble under the weight of declining bookings and rising costs. I needed this to work. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. I smoothed my dress and opened the door to find Mr. Patterson, a local businessman who'd shown interest in my catering operation. Behind him stood a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed strangely familiar. "Mrs. Crawford, thank you for having us," Mr. Patterson said, stepping inside. "This is Desmond Whitmore, one of our major investors." My breath caught. Desmond Whitmore. Those eyes, that gentle smile. 50 years melted away in an instant. This was the boy I'd loved with all my teenage heart. The one who'd held my hand during senior year, who'd promised to write when he left for college. The one whose letters stopped coming after I married Richard in a moment of loneliness and hurt pride. "It's a pleasure," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deeper now, weathered by decades, but unmistakably his. Our fingers touched, and I felt that same electric spark from when we were 17. Did he recognize me? My maiden name was Sullivan then. Crawford came with marriage, along with a life I never quite expected. The other investors arrived: Mrs. Chen from the restaurant supply company, Mr. Davis, who owned several event venues, and Ms. Rodriguez from the hospitality group. I guided everyone to the dining room, my hands trembling slightly as I served the first course. The conversation flowed well. I explained my business model, shared testimonials from satisfied clients, and outlined my expansion plans. Desmond asked thoughtful questions about my recipes, my background, and my vision. Each time he spoke, I caught him studying my face, as if searching for something. "These flavors are extraordinary," Mrs. Chen said, savoring the salmon. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" I was about to respond when I heard the front door slam. My stomach dropped. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of heels being kicked off carelessly. Lennox appeared in the doorway, her dark hair disheveled, her expensive blouse wrinkled and stained. At 40, she should have been the picture of success, but tonight she looked like someone who'd spent the afternoon in a bar. The sharp scent of alcohol wafted from her as she swayed slightly, gripping the doorframe for support. Well, she slurred, her voice cutting through the polite dinner conversation like a rusty knife. "Look at this fancy little party." Every head turned toward her. I felt heat creep up my neck, my carefully orchestrated evening beginning to crumble. "Lennox," I said quietly, forcing a smile, "these are the investors I told you about. Perhaps you could—" "Investors?" She laughed, a harsh sound that made me wince. "You mean people Mom's trying to con into thinking she actually knows what she's doing?" The silence was deafening. Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mrs. Chen set down her fork. I felt Desmond's eyes on me, and the shame burned like acid in my throat. "Sweetheart, maybe you should go upstairs and—" "No, Mom." Lennox stumbled into the room, pointing an unsteady finger at me. "These people should know the truth. You want to invest in someone who can't even manage her own daughter?" Someone who spent so much time building this precious little business that she forgot how to be a mother? I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning, faces blurring together in a haze of embarrassment and pain. "Lennox, please," I whispered, but she wasn't finished. She grabbed an empty wine glass from the sideboard and waved it dramatically. "You know what, Mom? You're being stupid. Stop trying to impress people who don't care about you and do something useful for once. Go wash the dishes. At least then you'll be good for something." The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stunned silence. That's when everything inside me broke too. The investors left within 10 minutes. Polite excuses, awkward handshakes, promises to be in touch soon that we all knew would never come. I stood in my doorway watching their cars disappear into the night, each taillight taking my dreams with it. Lennox had stumbled upstairs without another word, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my evening and the sharp fragments of broken glass that seemed to mirror the pieces of my shattered heart. All except one. Desmond remained. "Let me help you clean up," he said softly, already bending to collect the larger pieces of glass. "You don't have to," I managed, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I'm sure you have somewhere important to be." He paused, a piece of crystal in his palm, and looked up at me with those same gentle eyes I'd fallen in love with 50 years ago. "Actually, Myrtle, I don't." Hearing my name on his lips, my real name, not Mrs. Crawford, sent a tremor through me. He did know. He'd known all evening. We worked in silence, sweeping glass and clearing plates. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while my mind reeled from the humiliation. When everything was cleaned, we found ourselves standing in my kitchen, the weight of 5 decades hanging between us. "How long have you known?" I asked. "The moment I saw your name on the business proposal," he admitted. "Myrtle Sullivan, who became Myrtle Crawford. I spent years wondering what happened to you after you married Richard." The pain in his voice was unmistakable. I leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. "You stopped writing," I said. "After that first semester, your letters just stopped." Desmond's face crumpled. "I never stopped writing, Myrtle. I sent letters every week for 2 years. When you didn't respond, I called your house. Your mother told me you were married and didn't want to hear from me anymore." The room tilted. "What?" "She said you'd moved on, that bothering you would only hurt everyone involved." His voice was barely a whisper. "I respected that. I thought you were happy." My mother. The woman who'd disapproved of Desmond because he came from the wrong side of town. The woman who'd pushed me toward Richard, the banker's son with prospects and a steady future. I'd married Richard in a haze of heartbreak and family pressure, convinced that Desmond had forgotten me the moment he left for college. "I never got your letters," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought you'd moved on too." We stared at each other across the kitchen island, both of us finally understanding the cruel trick fate had played on us. 50 years of separate lives, built on a foundation of lies and misunderstanding. "I never married," Desmond said quietly. "Never found anyone who made me feel the way you did." Tears I'd been holding back all evening finally spilled over. "I had a good marriage with Richard," I said, though it sounded like I was trying to convince myself. "We were content, but I never forgot you either." The next morning brought a harsh reality check. I was in my kitchen, still wearing yesterday's dress, when the phone rang. My first instinct was to ignore it, but the persistent ringing forced me to answer. "Mrs. Crawford? This is Janet from Hillcrest Country Club. I'm calling about the Henderson anniversary party." My heart sank. The Hendersons were one of my biggest clients, a couple celebrating their golden anniversary with a party for 200 guests. The contract was worth more than I'd make in 3 months. "Yes, Janet, how can I help you?" "Well, it's rather awkward, but we've received some concerning information about your business. We're going to have to cancel the contract." The words hit me like a physical blow. Cancel? But we're just 2 weeks away from the event. Everything's been planned, the deposit's paid. I understand this is difficult, but we've heard that your business might not be reliable. Someone called yesterday claiming to be your daughter, expressing concerns about your ability to handle large events. Lennox. My blood turned to ice. Mrs. Crawford, are you still there? Yes, I managed. May I ask exactly what was said? She mentioned that you've been having some difficulties lately. Memory issues, problems with organization. She felt it was her duty to warn us before something embarrassing happened at such an important event. Memory issues. Organization problems. Lennox had painted me as a failing old woman who couldn't be trusted with a simple catering job. I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford. The decision has been made. We'll honor the cancellation clause in the contract, of course. The cancellation clause that would leave me with maybe 10% of what I should have earned, barely enough to cover the supplies I'd already ordered. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just embarrassment over last night's disaster. This was sabotage. My own daughter was systematically destroying the business that kept me alive. The only thing I had left of the independence I'd fought so hard to build. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Desmond standing on my porch, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing a concerned expression. I brought breakfast, he said gently. I thought you might need someone to talk to. I let him in, grateful beyond words for his presence. As we sat at my kitchen table, I told him about the phone call, about Lennox's sabotage, about the crushing weight of watching everything I'd built crumble around me. How long has she been doing this to you? He asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe months, maybe longer. I've been losing clients, getting fewer referrals. I thought it was just the economy. Or maybe I was getting too old for this business. Desmond reached across the table and took my hand. You're not too old, Myrtle. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known. You always were. But as I sat there, holding hands with the man I'd loved half a century ago while my daughter destroyed my life from upstairs, I wondered if strength had anything to do with it anymore. I waited until noon, when I knew Lennox would finally crawl out of bed with her usual hangover. The sound of her footsteps on the stairs was heavier than usual, punctuated by muttered curses as she made her way to the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway wearing one of Richard's old college sweatshirts, her dark hair a tangled mess, mascara smudged under her bloodshot eyes. Without acknowledging me, she went straight to the coffee maker, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone well acquainted with morning-after rituals. We need to talk, I said, keeping my voice steady. God, Mom, not now. My head is killing me. She poured coffee into a mug, added 3 spoonfuls of sugar, and took a long sip. Whatever it is, can it wait until I'm human again? No, it can't wait. I stood up from the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly. The Hendersons canceled their anniversary party this morning. Lennox paused, the mug halfway to her lips. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or satisfaction. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual mask of indifference. That's too bad, she said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe they found someone better. They canceled because someone claiming to be my daughter called them yesterday. Someone who told them I was having memory problems and couldn't be trusted with their event. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension. Lennox set down her mug with deliberate care, her movement suddenly precise despite her supposed hangover. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't lie to me, Lennox. Not anymore. I stepped closer, studying her face. How many other clients have you called? How long have you been sabotaging my business? Something in my daughter's expression shifted, like a mask finally slipping away. When she looked at me again, her eyes were cold, calculating. The hangover act disappeared completely. You want to know the truth, Mom? She leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms. Fine. Yes, I called the Hendersons, and the Morrison wedding last month, and that corporate event you lost in September. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Why? Why would you do this to me? Lennox laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. Because you never deserved any of it. This house, this business, the respect everyone gives you. You stole it all. Stole it? I built this business from nothing after your father died. I worked 18-hour days, scraped together every penny, while I needed you. The words exploded out of her, years of resentment finally finding their voice. While I was falling apart, watching my father die, begging for my mother's attention, you were playing businesswoman. You chose your precious catering company over your own daughter. I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time the depth of her anger. Lennox, I was grieving too. The business kept me sane, gave me a reason to get up every morning. Bullshit! She pushed away from the counter, pacing like a caged animal. You know what kept you going? The attention, the praise. Everyone calling you so brave, so independent. Poor widow Myrtle, making it on her own. You ate it up. That's not true, isn't it? She spun around to face me, her voice rising. When's the last time you asked about my life, Mom? When's the last time you cared about anything that didn't involve your business? The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Since Richard's death, I'd thrown myself into work with desperate intensity, using it to avoid the crushing weight of grief and loneliness. But I'd thought I was providing for both of us, securing our future. I was trying to take care of us, I said weakly. You were trying to replace Dad with a company that would never leave you. Lennox's voice turned vicious. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. You chose it over me, and now you're going to lose both. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the kitchen window, I could see Desmond's silver hair. Lennox followed my gaze, and her expression darkened further. Perfect, she sneered. Your boyfriend's here. How long has this been going on? It's not what you think. Oh, I know exactly what this is. She moved toward the front door with predatory grace. Some old man looking for a lonely widow to take advantage of. How pathetic. I followed her, panic rising in my chest. Lennox, please don't. But she was already opening the door, putting on a performance of sweet concern that would have fooled anyone who didn't know her true nature. Mr. Whitmore, she said with false warmth. How nice to see you again. I wanted to apologize for last night. I'd had a bit too much wine at dinner, and I'm afraid I wasn't at my best. Desmond glanced past her to me, concern evident in his eyes. I actually came to check on your mother, make sure she was all right after everything that happened. Oh, that's so thoughtful of you. Lennox's smile never wavered, but I could hear the poison underneath, though I have to say, I'm a little concerned about older men who prey on vulnerable widows, especially ones who show up the day after a business meeting goes badly. Lennox, I stepped forward, mortified. It's fine, Myrtle, Desmond said quietly, his eyes never leaving Lennox's face. I understand she's protective of you. Protective? Lennox laughed. Oh, Mr. Whitmore, you have no idea how protective I can be. My mother has already lost one business opportunity because of her declining judgment. I'd hate to see her make another mistake. The threat was clear. Desmond heard it too. I could tell by the way his jaw tightened. But he kept his voice level, professional. Perhaps I should go, he said, looking at me with regret. We can discuss the investment opportunity another time. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Desmond, please stay. Lennox was just leaving. My daughter's mask slipped completely then, revealing the fury underneath. Actually, Mom, I think we need to have a family discussion about boundaries, about appropriate behavior for women your age, about what happens to little old ladies who don't listen to their daughter's advice. She stepped closer to Desmond, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow managed to be more threatening than shouting. My mother is very fragile right now, Mr. Whitmore. Grief does terrible things to people's minds, makes them vulnerable to manipulation, makes them forget what's real and what's fantasy. Her smile was razor sharp. It would be such a shame if she got confused about your intentions and embarrassed herself further. I watched this exchange with growing horror, finally seeing my daughter for what she truly was. Not the grieving child I'd thought I was protecting, but a manipulative woman who would destroy anyone who threatened her control over my life. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Lennox's threats echoing in my mind. Every creak of the house made me wonder if she was awake too, plotting her next move to destroy what little remained of my independence. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. The kitchen felt different in the darkness, shadows turning familiar objects into strangers. I was reaching for the kettle when I heard it, the soft sound of papers rustling from Richard's old study. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The study door was ajar, and through the crack, I could see the glow of a desk lamp. Lennox sat hunched over Richard's old desk, documents spread before her like a war plan. My business papers, financial records, insurance documents, the deed to the house. I pushed the door open wider, and she looked up, completely unashamed at being caught. "Mom?" she said calmly, as if rifling through my private papers at 3 a.m. was perfectly normal. "I was wondering when you'd notice. What are you doing?" She leaned back in Richard's leather chair, a document in her hand. "Research, making sure I understand exactly what we're dealing with here." I stepped into the room, my heart pounding. "Those are my private papers." "Actually, some of them aren't." She held up a bank statement. "This joint account, for instance. The one you opened when Dad got sick with both our names on it? I've been monitoring it for months. The checking account I'd set up during Richard's illness, when I'd been so overwhelmed with medical appointments and treatments that I'd needed help managing our finances. I'd added Lennox's name so she could write checks for prescriptions and doctor bills. "You've been stealing from me?" "Stealing?" Lennox's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "I'm not stealing, Mom. I'm protecting family assets from poor financial decisions, like this catering business that's bleeding money, or your newfound romance with a man who's clearly after your savings." She stood up, moving around the desk toward me. In the lamplight, her face looked sharp, predatory. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You're going to end this ridiculous flirtation with Mr. Whitmore. You're going to close the catering business before you lose what's left of Dad's life insurance money, and you're going to sign power of attorney over to me so I can make sure you don't make any more catastrophic mistakes." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious." She picked up another document, a power of attorney form, already filled out and waiting for my signature. "I've done my research, Mom. Women your age, especially widows, are prime targets for financial abuse. Desmond Whitmore is probably running a dozen scams just like this one." "You don't know anything about Desmond." "I know he disappeared for 50 years and suddenly shows up right when you're vulnerable and have money to lose." Lennox's voice hardened. "I also know that if you don't sign this willingly, I'll have you declared incompetent. Those phone calls I made about your memory problems, they're just the beginning. I can find doctors who'll testify that you're not capable of making sound financial decisions." The room spun around me. "You would do that? You? To your own mother? To protect what's left of our family's assets?" "Absolutely." She gestured to the papers spread across the desk. "I've already documented your erratic behavior, your declining business, the poor judgment you showed bringing a stranger into our home. It wouldn't be hard to build a case." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Worse than a stranger, an enemy. "And if I refuse?" Lennox smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. "Then you'll lose everything anyway, but publicly, in court, with all your former clients and neighbors watching as your own daughter testifies about your mental decline." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Sign the papers, Mom. Make this easy on both of us." I looked down at the power of attorney form, at my name printed in careful block letters, at the signature line that would hand control of my entire life to the person who'd been systematically destroying it. "I need time to think," I said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning." Lennox gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. "Sleep on it. But remember, this is happening whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether you want to maintain some dignity in the process." I turned and walked back to my bedroom, my legs unsteady. But instead of going to sleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and made a phone call. Desmond answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep, but immediately alert when he heard my voice. "Myrtle? What's wrong?" "I need to see you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere Lennox won't find us?" "Of course. Where?" I thought of the little diner where Richard and I used to have breakfast on Sunday mornings, before his illness, before everything changed. "Murphy's Diner on Elm Street. 7 a.m. I'll be there." He paused. "Myrtle, are you safe?" Was I safe? in my own home, with my own daughter planning to steal my life away piece by piece. For now, I said. But Desmond, I think I'm going to need your help. The next morning, I left the house before Lennox woke up, taking only my purse and the spare key I kept hidden under the garden gnome Richard had always hated. As I drove to the diner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not fear, not grief, not the crushing weight of obligation that had defined my life since Richard's death. Determination. Lennox thought she knew me, thought she could manipulate and control me like she had for years. She thought I was just a weak old woman, too afraid of losing her love to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. When I walked into Murphy's diner and saw Desmond waiting in our old booth, his eyes full of concern and something deeper, something that looked like love, I knew I wasn't facing this battle alone. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like myself again. And that woman, the one who'd loved fearlessly at 17 and built a business from nothing at 63, wasn't going down without a fight. I want to disappear, I told Desmond across the worn Formica table at Murphy's diner. Not literally. But I want Lennox to think she's won until it's too late for her to stop what's coming. Desmond stirred his coffee slowly, processing everything I'd told him about the power of attorney, the threats, the systematic destruction of my business. His jaw was tight with controlled anger, but his voice remained calm. What do you need from me? Your investment offer. Is it still on the table? Of course it is. But Myrtle, are you sure about this? Once we start moving your assets, there's no going back. I thought about Lennox sleeping peacefully in my house, confident that she'd broken me completely. There's already no going back. She made sure of that. Over the next 3 hours, Desmond and I planned my escape with the precision of a military operation. He had connections, lawyers, accountants, people who specialized in protecting assets from family predators. By the time we left the diner, I had appointments scheduled and a new sense of purpose burning in my chest. I returned home to find Lennox in the kitchen, the power of attorney papers spread on the counter like a death warrant. There you are, she said without looking up from her phone. I was starting to worry you'd done something stupid. Just went for a drive, I said, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. Needed to clear my head. She glanced up then, studying my face. And? Have you made your decision? I moved to the coffee maker, keeping my back to her so she couldn't see my expression. I've been thinking about what you said, about protecting the family assets. Good. There was satisfaction in her voice. I know this is hard, Mom, but it's for the best. I turned around, letting my shoulders slump slightly, aging myself with posture alone. I just don't understand how it came to this. Your father always said family should stick together. Dad's gone, Lennox said, her tone sharper now, and he left us with a mess to clean up. Medical bills, a failing business, and now this situation with your judgment being compromised. My judgment being compromised? I let a tremor enter my voice, playing the part she expected. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am getting too old to handle things on my own. Something shifted in Lennox's posture. She was buying it. I'll sign the papers, I said quietly. But I need a few days to get my affairs in order. Close out some accounts, notify clients. Lennox nodded, her smile almost predatory. Of course, take the time you need. But remember, Mom, no more contact with Desmond Whitmore. That ends today. I understand, I lied. What I actually understood was that my daughter had underestimated me completely. Over the next week, I played my part perfectly. I moved slowly, spoke softly, and let Lennox believe she was managing my decline with compassionate efficiency. She monitored my phone calls, checked my mail, and hovered over every decision like a concerned daughter protecting her failing mother. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead. While she thought I was arranging to close my business accounts, I was actually transferring everything to a new company structure that Desmond's lawyers had created. The catering business wasn't dying. It was being reborn under a different name, with different ownership, legally protected from any claims Lennox might make. When she thought I was canceling remaining client contracts, I was actually transferring them to my new business entity. The clients who'd been turned against me by Lennox's lies were contacted by Desmond's people, who explained the situation delicately but thoroughly. Most were horrified to learn they'd been manipulated and eager to make amends. The house, the one thing I thought I'd have to sacrifice, turned out to be my strongest weapon. While reviewing the deed with Desmond's attorney, we discovered something interesting. When Richard and I bought the house 40 years ago, we'd structured the ownership in a way that protected it from exactly the kind of manipulation Lennox was attempting. She could threaten all she wanted, but she had no legal claim to force me out of my own home. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after her ultimatum, Lennox sat me down at the kitchen table with the power of attorney papers. "Are you ready, Mom?" she asked, pen in hand. I looked at the documents, at the carefully typed paragraphs that would have given her control over every aspect of my life. Then I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd spent months systematically destroying my happiness while pretending to care about my well-being. "Actually," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, "I've changed my mind." The pen froze in her hand. "What?" I said, "I've changed my mind." I stood up, feeling taller than I had in years. "I'm not signing anything." Lennox's face went through a series of rapid changes: confusion, disbelief, then fury. "Mom, we discussed this. You agreed. I agreed to nothing." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden Richard and I had planted together. "I listened to your threats, your manipulations, your lies about my mental capacity, but I never agreed to hand my life over to someone who's been sabotaging me for months." "You can't be serious." Lennox stood up, the papers scattering to the floor. "Without this protection, you're going to lose everything." I turned back to face her, and this time I didn't hide my smile. "Too late for that warning, don't you think? Since you're the one who's been destroying my business all along." Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Fine. If you won't do this willingly, I'll have you declared incompetent. I have documentation, witnesses." "You have lies," I interrupted, "and lies have a way of falling apart under scrutiny." I moved to Richard's old desk and pulled out a manila folder, like these phone records, showing exactly when you called my clients, or these bank statements, showing the money you've been taking from our joint account, or this recording of our conversation last week, where you threatened to destroy me if I didn't sign over my power of attorney. Lennox's face went white. "You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I?" I set the folder on the table between us. "I've already filed a police report about the financial theft. My lawyer has copies of everything. And as of this morning, your name has been removed from all my accounts." The silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of 40 years of motherhood ending in this moment. "You're making a mistake," Lennox said finally, her voice hollow. "The only mistake I made was believing that you'd changed. That underneath all that anger and manipulation was still my little girl." I picked up the unsigned power of attorney papers and walked to the fireplace. "But that little girl died a long time ago, didn't she?" I dropped the papers into the flames and watched them curl and blacken. "Pack your things," I said without turning around. "You have until tomorrow to find somewhere else to live." 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new catering facility, watching Desmond arrange flowers on the prep counter while soft jazz played from the radio. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting everything in a golden glow that made the stainless steel surfaces sparkle like jewelry. "The roses are beautiful," I said, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. At 68, I'd thought romance was behind me, but being with Desmond felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. "Not as beautiful as the woman wearing them," he murmured, turning in my arms to kiss my forehead. I'd pinned a small white rose to my apron, a tradition we'd started when I finally accepted his partnership in the business, both professional and personal. The new company, Memories Catering, was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. Word had spread about what Lennox had done, and the community's response had been overwhelming. Former clients returned with apologies and new bookings. Fresh customers sought us out specifically because of our story of resilience. Local newspapers wrote features about the grandmother who fought back, though I always insisted they focus on the food rather than the drama. We'd moved the business out of my home to this bright, commercial space that felt like a dream come true. Desmond had invested not just money, but expertise. His background in restaurant management complemented my culinary skills perfectly. For the first time in my life, I had a true partner in every sense of the word. The bell above the front door chimed. and I heard familiar voices in the reception area. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, followed by her husband of 50 years. "Myrtle," she said warmly, "I hope we're not interrupting." "Never," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "What brings you by?" "We wanted to apologize again," Mr. Henderson said, his weathered face sincere, "and to ask if you might consider catering our anniversary party after all. I know it's short notice. We completely understand if you can't," Mrs. Henderson added quickly. "After the way we treated you, we wouldn't blame you for saying no." I exchanged a glance with Desmond, who nodded encouragingly. "When were you thinking?" "Next month," she said hopefully. 200 guests. I know it's exactly what we canceled before, but we're hoping to make it right." I thought about the humiliation I'd felt when they'd canceled, the crushing blow it had dealt to my already struggling business. Then I looked around my beautiful new kitchen, at the success I'd built from the ashes of that failure. "We'd be honored to cater your anniversary," I said. "Let's sit down and talk about what you have in mind." As we discussed menu options and decorating themes, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with second chances, mine and theirs. After the Hendersons left, Desmond and I cleaned up the kitchen together, moving in the synchronized dance of people who'd found their rhythm. It was during moments like these that I felt most grateful for the path that had led me here. "Any regrets?" he asked, as if reading my thoughts. I considered the question seriously. "About Lennox?" "About any of it." I dried the last plate and hung up the towel, thinking about my daughter. She'd moved to another state after I'd made it clear she was no longer welcome in my home. We hadn't spoken since that final confrontation, though I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she was struggling financially and had been forced to get a job for the first time in years. Part of me, the mother part that would never fully die, worried about her, but I'd learned the difference between loving someone and enabling them. Lennox had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. "No regrets," I said finally. "Not about standing up for myself, not about choosing my happiness over her manipulation, not about letting you back into my life." Desmond smiled and pulled me close. "Good, because I have something to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. "Myrtle Sullivan," he said, dropping to one knee right there in our professional kitchen. "I loved you when we were 17, and I love you even more now at 68. Will you marry me?" Inside the box was a simple diamond ring, nothing flashy or ostentatious, just perfect for the woman I'd become. "Are you sure you want to marry an old widow with complicated family issues?" I asked, though I was already nodding yes. "I want to marry the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known," he said, slipping the ring onto my finger. "The one who built a business from nothing, who fought back against impossible odds, who chose love over fear." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting 50 years for this moment. We were planning a simple ceremony for the following spring, just a few close friends, maybe some clients who'd become family. Nothing elaborate, nothing that needed to prove anything to anyone. Just two people who'd found their way back to each other against all odds. The phone rang as we were locking up for the day. I almost didn't answer. We were officially closed, and I was eager to get home and start dinner. But something made me pick up. "Memories Catering, this is Myrtle." "Mom?" The voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the confident manipulator who'd tried to control my life 6 months ago. My hand tightened on the phone. "Lennox, I've been thinking about calling for weeks. I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of maternal concern. "What do you need?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I don't need anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know that probably doesn't mean much now, but it's true." I sank into the chair behind the front counter, Desmond moving to stand beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Where are you?" I asked. "Portland. I got a job at a restaurant. Nothing fancy, just waiting tables, but it's honest work." She paused. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did to you, the way I treated you, It was unforgivable. Then why are you calling? Because I finally understand what I lost. Not the money or the house or the business. I lost my mother, the best person I've ever known, and I threw it away because I was angry and selfish and stupid. Tears stung my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. What do you want from me, Lennox? Nothing, she said again. Just the chance to tell you that you were right to fight back. You were right to choose yourself. And I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. The line went quiet except for the sound of both of us breathing. I heard about your engagement, she said finally. To Desmond. I'm happy for you, Mom. Really? How did you? Small world, I guess. A friend saw the announcement in the paper. She laughed, but it sounded sad. He sounds like a good man. You deserve that. I looked at Desmond, at this patient, kind man who'd waited 50 years to love me properly. He is, I said. I should let you go, Lennox said. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. It might take a while, but I'm trying. After I hung up, Desmond and I sat in the quiet of our empty restaurant, processing the conversation. How do you feel? He asked. Like a mother, I said honestly, but also like a woman who knows her worth. I would always love Lennox. That was the burden and blessing of being a parent. But I would never again sacrifice my happiness for someone who didn't value it. Some lessons came too late to change the past, but just in time to save the future. As we drove home together, my engagement ring catching the last light of the setting sun, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Broken, defeated, ready to give up everything for the sake of keeping peace with a daughter who'd never respected her sacrifice. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, happier, more complete than I'd ever imagined possible. At 68, I was finally learning that it's never too late to choose yourself, and sometimes that choice is the most loving thing you can do, for everyone involved. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.